You're listening to the Overcome Pornography for Good podcast. Episode 234 is watching porn considered cheating? Welcome to the Overcome Pornography for Good podcast, where we take a research-based, trauma-informed, and results-focused approach to quitting porn. This approach has been revolutionary and changed thousands and thousands of lives. I'm your host, Sarah Brewer. Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast episode where we're going to talk in depth about, is porn use considered infidelity? Is watching porn considered cheating? So as we're going through today's class on is porn cheating, is porn use infidelity, I want to remind you of an amazing resource that we have for you, which is the program. And so the value of the program, this is where you can really come in and get help and get coaching and get help with your specific scenario and your specific situation and your specific relationship. We can really support you in that setting. You're going to hear in this episode, I'm talking to 1,000 different dynamics at once. And so some of this is going to apply to your dynamic. Some of this isn't going to apply to your dynamic, your relationship dynamic, that is. And so I hope this is so valuable to you. And if you want more support, come and join us in the program. Come and get coaching. Come join us in the program. You can join us centerforovercoming.com/work with me. All right, you guys, enjoy this class. It's so good. First things first is that this isn't a black and white answer. I'm not going to give you a yes or a no. And I know some of you might be like, darn it, just give me a simple answer. But there's a lot of nuance here. And the goal here isn't to tell you how to think, but the goal here is instead to equip you with language and context that you might not have been given before around this topic. And I promise that at the end of it, you're going to feel a lot more clear and you're going to have some actionable steps on what to do next and how to start thinking about this and some more language and more context that can help you with the pain of your experience right now. This question, does watching porn count as cheating, is a big emotional question. It's a really common one that we get often. And so it can feel really difficult to untangle and understand. And so as we're going through these slides, I just hope that you'll show up with a lot of love for yourself, a lot of grace for yourself. Take a deep breath. Everything is going to be okay. And let's talk about this. Let's go into depth about this. And there are a couple of people that I'm talking to in this class typically too. So the people I work with mostly are those who are trying to quit viewing porn. But there's also the partner. And so in this question, there's the two parties. There's the partner who's feeling betrayed, or the partner who's wondering if it's infidelity, or the partner who has feelings about it. And then there's the person who's viewed pornography. And so I'm going to do my best to balance this conversation for both parties. And we're going to talk about betrayal trauma. We're going to talk about that. But just so you're aware, listen to yourself, take what resonates, take what feels good. And not everything I say is going to apply to every individual or to each couple or partnership. Okay, so let's start here with what is infidelity. So infidelity, if we redefine infidelity, instead of the infidelity being these specific actions, infidelity is a breach of an agreement. And so it's breaking trust, secrecy, deception, or acting outside of relational agreements. And I did an interview with Andrea Giles a little while ago where we talked about this in depth, of infidelity really being that piece of the piece of trust being broken and an agreement being broken. And so there is no universal rule that says porn is or isn't infidelity. It depends on what are the agreements that you've made. Were those agreements mutual and conscious? And, was trust being broken in a meaningful way? This second point here is huge, and what we're going to really, because, I'm thinking of a lens of someone who grew up in a lot of purity culture, a lot of shame, who kind of came into relationships just with rules that were given to them instead of context to be able to, think and choose and decide. And so this second piece, whether those agreements were mutual and conscious, is going to be a really key piece for you going forward now. Okay, so again, watching porn isn't inherently infidelity unless it violates a clear and mutual agreement that you have. Now, if you've never talked about it and you both just assumed that porn was cheating, or maybe you were raised with purity culture and a lot of sexual shame without education on sexuality and sexual values, you might be operating out of inherited rules instead of conscious choices. And so I want to help give you the tools today where you can make some conscious choices around this instead of just operating off of these inherited rules that sometimes bring a lot of pain if we don't look at them consciously. And really quickly, this term purity culture, when I'm saying purity culture, what I mean by that, it's a belief system that teaches that someone's worth is tied to their sexual choices. And there's a lot more behind that term, but like a really simple definition there is just that your worth is tied to your sexual choices. And so if you grew up with really heavy teachings around that, it creates worthiness wounds and it creates shame and it creates a lot of the problems that are typically the undercurrent of this unwanted pornography use for people. And so if you're new to me, that's what I teach a lot. I'll teach a lot about these undercurrents of purity culture and how they're creating more problems with porn and how we can heal those and learn to get a lot of power back and not feel like porn is running our lives, but that we are running our lives. Okay, next definition, what is betrayal trauma? And so this is kind of my little trigger warning is if you are a partner or someone who is struggling with your partner's porn use and it's so triggering to you and it's like really deeply affecting you. When I say triggering, I don't mean that in like a nonchalant way. Oh, it's triggering. I mean like it's deeply painful for you. There's this term betrayal trauma that resonates with a lot of people. It's a deep emotional and psychological wound that occurs when someone you depend on deeply violates your trust. And so this can come from, a partner that you deeply depend on or deeply trusted that violates that trust. It can come from an organization that you deeply depend on that violates your trust in a meaningful way. It can come from a lot of different ways, but betrayal trauma is this experience and this wound when someone you deeply depend on violates your trust. And so this is why lying about porn use is much more damaging in relationships than the porn use itself typically. And so this is, also why we're always going to recommend that you be as honest and whatever difficulty there is around being honest and transparent around that. We want to work through that so that you can be honest and transparent because it's going to have the lying about it is typically what creates a lot of issues and the betrayal trauma and the problems in a relationship. But if you were raised to believe that sexual feelings are scary and dangerous and to avoid anything sexual at all costs, and then you view porn, you can see how this creates kind of this sticky conundrum of, I'm going to use that word undercurrents again, but like undercurrents of like, let's lie about this because it is such a terrible thing. Not that this justifies any lying about behavior, but just want to show the nuance here and the complexity of what's going on. So often what happens too is they're raised to believe that sexual feelings are scary and dangerous to avoid them at all costs. And then they start to use porn as a coping mechanism. They learn to use it as a coping mechanism because porn, what it does is it gets rid of stress really quickly, or it gets rid of difficult emotion pretty quickly. It's an escape. And so our brain starts to attach to that escape mechanism and then we keep turning to it. So, then a common thing that we see after is people getting into the shame spiral where they view porn, they think something's wrong with them, and then they feel shame. And then when you feel shame, what do? You hide, you avoid, you maybe lie about it from shame. And then when you're feeling shame, feeling awful, what do you do to escape the shame? Sometimes view more porn. That becomes a very common cycle that we see in a lot of people. So again, this creates kind of this sticky conundrum and a difficult situation to work through, but there is a way through it. So the solution here is to start to give you tools, language, and context to start to make sense of your experience and your partner's experience. So I want us to first start approaching porn use in relationships with this diagram, thinking of it as really what's underneath the surface and not just looking at the porn use alone. For some people, if porn is really a negative thing in your culture or in your upbringing, or in your religion or in your communities, sometimes people will use porn as the scapegoat and they say, oh, well, their marriage is fine except for porn, or their marriage fell apart because of porn. And it's not typically that simple. There's going to be stuff underneath the surface that is creating the issues, and it's not the porn itself. And so if in the relationship, if what's underneath the porn use is lying and hiding, that's very different than if what's underneath the porn use is open communication. And one partner is saying, yes, like, are you okay with me using porn? And I'm going to use porn. That's very different than lying and hiding. If underneath the surface is using porn to escape intimacy with your partner, that's very different than someone who uses porn to connect and to play with their partner, right? And so it's not just a blanket statement, porn is ruining relationships. That's just not how it works. It's what's underneath the surface. Is there a history of infidelity? That creates, huge dynamics and of course, a lot of feelings probably about secretive porn use. Is sexual exploration underneath it? Is it a greed use underneath it? Is there fear and shame underneath the iceberg here? Do you use porn to cope with sexual frustration? Is porn a piece of your sexual reclamation? We really want to look underneath the surface here. What is underneath the porn use instead of just a blanket statement that porn use is really meaning relationships? Also, it's really important context here. So what's behind the individual's porn use? There can be so many things here. Is it buffering or escaping emotion? And so many of the people I work with, this is where they feel trapped, is that they were never taught what to do with negative emotion, just taught to push it away or pretend that it's not there or be a man and don't cry, right? And so porn becomes a coping mechanism for negative emotion. Is sexual shame underneath the porn use? Is willpower, repression, shame spirals that lead to binging, maybe witching hours. Your brain just remembers every night at 10 p.m. to use porn. Or, loneliness. Is loneliness what's behind the porn use? And again, not that we would use any of this to justify lying or to justify not being honest or bad behavior, but context here is really important and it can help us understand. And so again, what is behind the individual's porn use? Is it enhancing sexual desire? Is it exploring fantasies that their partner isn't interested? Is there connection to self piece there? There's can be so many things underneath the porn use. So we want to understand what's going on underneath the surface here. Intent matters. And so although intent doesn't justify, it never justifies, it does give us some context here to, is the intent to disconnect from my partner, to be disloyal, to get the excitement of lying and cheating? Is the intent behind it escaping emotion and feeling stuck in shame spirals? That really matters here. And so again, what's happening under the surface is really vitally important to understand. I want to talk now about the role of purity culture in shame. So again, purity culture is a belief system that teaches that a person's worth is tied to their sexual choices. That's going to be the simple way I'm going to describe purity culture today. And many of us were taught that sexual thoughts equal sin. And so when you're taught that, you might internalize things like, my partner watching something else is cheating. I once got an email from someone who said, my wife is watching Bridgerton. Have you guys seen Bridgerton? It is just very naked sex scenes. It's a show on Netflix and women love it. It's based in, Victorian era. It's so romantic but there are graphic sex scenes. And so I got an email from someone saying, I found my wife cheating on me. She was watching Bridgerton. And so, right, that makes sense. If we internalize some of these beliefs, of course we might think that. And so we also might have internalized, my desires make me unsafe. It's unsafe for me to have these feelings. Or I'm bad if I'm turned on by anything outside of my marriage. That's a whole one that we could do a whole episode and a whole class on. What if instead we can start to view this as everyone has, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth here in a minute, but everyone has their own inherent sexual self, and that sexuality just exists, and being turned on or having feelings or having dreams or having these feelings for someone or something else that isn't my partner doesn't necessarily mean that something's wrong with you. It just means you're a human, and you can have those desires or you can have those feelings and then choose what to do with them. And that's where morality comes into play. Morality isn't just a feeling. You're not immoral if you have a feeling. Morality is going to be based off of your values and the choices that you make with those feelings. So can we make conscious choices here instead of choices based in fear and shame around sex? That's what I'm always going to push us to do. If there's fear and shame around this, let's look at it and then let's see if we can do our best to dissipate fear and shame and then make conscious choices without fear and shame and not just run off of the assumption that all porn is cheating. That's going to be really helpful for us. And let's actually talk about this a little bit more in depth. Let's talk about monogamy and this question. In monogamy, is my partner's sexuality mine to control? And so this is a super common belief is, I get married or I partner with my person and then I own your sexuality and you own my sexuality. And also what this sounds like, and I just want us to explore this a little bit. What this might sound like too is if you're attracted to someone else, you're betraying me. If you're turned on when I'm not involved, something's wrong. Monogamy means I get to decide what you do with your body, mind, and desires. And if you climax without me, it's cheating. So as I read those, I want to just do a quick check-in. How does your body feel when we talk about monogamy in this way? I own your sexuality and you own mine. Is there any piece of it that feels tight, or that feels a little bit constrictive, or that feels like just a little bit of a rejection feeling in your body of the way that we talk about this? I want to just do a little quick check-in. And then ask yourself, you might notice some tightness, you might notice a little bit of rejection. You're like, that doesn't quite sound right. So ask yourself, is there something even more beautiful and even more true than this approach to monogamy? And check in and see how your body feels about that. Because there is some other ways for us to think about monogamy, where instead of I own yours and you own mine, I own my sexuality and you own your sexuality. And we choose to come together and share it in these meaningful ways that we've discussed. We choose to be exclusive in these meaningful ways that we've discussed. But can you feel the difference? Instead of I own yours and you own mine, it's like I own mine, you own yours. And we're choosing to bring it and to share it together. So it's not that you're not allowed to feel desire for anyone else, or that I get to police your fantasies. I get to decide if you masturbate. I get to police your body. It's instead, maybe we agree to keep our romantic or sexual connection exclusive, but we're clear on what that means to us. Exclusive for some people is, like person to person. This is us, but like you with yourself, that's yours. If something comes up like desire, fantasy, curiosity, we talk about it. We don't shame it or hide it. And we prioritize honesty and shared decision-making over inherited rules or fear. Instead of saying you're not allowed to be turned on by anything but me, can we shift it? Does it feel better to shift this into, can we talk about what feels safe? What turns us on and where our boundaries are? Instead of, if you watch porn or if you masturbate without me, you're breaking our bond. Could we try, let's explore what that means to you. Let's explore what porn means to each of us and what kind of agreements feel good for me and what kind of agreements feel good for you. And so again, we're taking like the volatility out of it too, and coming together to make agreements and to understand what's under the surface, understand the context of what's going on. And then, starting to approach monogamy instead of I own you and you own mine, you own yours, I own mine. How do we want to come together and share this? What feels good to us? Because that belief that your partner's sexuality belongs to you, it tends to feed control and jealousy and anxiety. And so is there like a more whole way that we can approach this? It also encourages your partner to hide instead of connect. Not that, that justifies their hiding or their lying. Never, ever, ever. But, we don't want to turn you into this last piece too, the belief that your partner's sexuality belongs to you can turn you into a monitor and not a collaborator. And so this is that dynamic that sometimes I see of the partner feeling like they have to constantly check their phone, constantly look at what they're doing, check in every single day, monitor, instead of collaborator. And let me say here too, like trying to control someone's sexuality may be a trauma response after betrayal trauma. So if this is you, if you have been in a monitor, understand, like, I'm not coming after you. Understand there's so much like love and tenderness there because it's probably a trauma response to betrayal trauma, maybe a trauma response to heavy purity culture shame. And so if this is you or your partner's experience and that's like what they feel like they need to do is monitor, I want to encourage so much tenderness and love, and I want you to feel held here and know that you deserve support. You deserve to trust your partner. You deserve healing around this. And so I really want to make sure I bring that up because I don't ever want any of my clients to ever use this stuff against their partner in a hurtful way. Okay. But this belief that your partner's sexuality belongs to you, it does undermine true intimacy because intimacy, it requires choice. It requires freedom. And you can't connect to someone that you're trying to control. And again, if underneath the surface, if we're thinking of porn is underneath the surface, and I'm talking to the partner right now, I'm talking to the partner who's struggling or maybe is having these deep, difficult feelings of betrayal and trust. If underneath the surface is your partner is a history of lying and cheating and, a feeling of not being wanted or abusive attitudes or abusive behaviors, that's really important data. And so you can look at that data and, you deserve support and help and healing through all of that. Absolutely is what I'm trying to say here. And I would recommend to you that you prioritize your support here. Sometimes people, when they find out their partner is viewing porn or feeling, the betrayal trauma of their partner viewing porn, they want to push all of their resources to their partner, go get help, which is, of course I would recommend that, but they won't give themselves those same resources to get the support and help that they need. And so that's what I would encourage for you. So reframing fidelity, maybe a new way for us to think about fidelity is that fidelity is not about following inherited sexual rules like porn is cheating, all porn is cheating, but it's about staying in loving integrity with each other. So that means telling the truth even when it's hard, honoring each other's humanity, including sexuality and including imperfection, and being willing to co-create agreements, not just assume agreements. And so even if you've been married for a long time, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, but you haven't ever sat down and had these conversations, this is a beautiful opportunity for us to start co-creating agreements around this, not just assuming agreements. Even if you think that you both are going to be on the same page about it, listening to this together, listening to this class together, and being willing to have the hard conversations about this together is going to be really beneficial. Another great question for reflection when we're talking about fidelity is, where is the bulk of my sexual energy going? And maybe in a relationship that you want to be monogamous, in our relationship, where do we want the bulk of our sexual energy to flow? If most of my sexual energy is flowing towards porn, is that a red flag for us? What do we want to look at there? How can I choose to take this flow of inherent sexual energy and use it to nourish my partner and to put towards my partner instead of just the pornography? This kind of leads us into our next section. I have 2 more sections. Can someone in a monogamous relationship use porn in a way that isn't cheating? And what if we can't come to an agreement? What if my partner doesn't agree? So we're going to cover these 2 questions next. Before I get into this next section, I just want to remind you that you are the authority of your life. And I will remind you this over and over and over again until the day that I die, that you are the authority of your life. And so you get to decide. Again, my goal is I want to give you context, education, and ways to think about this, but you get to decide what you really believe and think about all of this. And you shouldn't let anyone else tell you how to believe and act and think about these things. And it's really easy with sexuality, especially a lot of us who grew up in heavy purity culture, shame. It's really easy to give that to someone else to decide, hey, is it okay to do this? Is it okay to do that? Is it okay to do this? And so it's also, relearning how to take the authority here and make decisions with me and my source and my connection to God and my connection to my highest self. What is true and good for me? And so each person is going to vary on how comfortable they feel with these examples. And so as I'm giving you some examples, what are we talking about again? Oh yeah, can someone, what are some ways that someone could use porn in a way that isn't cheating? So check in with yourself, avoid black and white thinking, and don't be offended if I mention something that you personally would never do, okay? And also remember, just because porn can be used in these ways doesn't mean that every partner feels comfortable with it. And so this is where communication and negotiation come in, not blanket assumed rules. Can someone in a monogamous committed relationship use porn in a way that isn't fidelity, possibly to even enhance connection or emotional understanding? So some people use it to explore fantasies. They watch things that they don't necessarily want to act out. And so many people watch content that they would never want in real life. Power dynamics, taboo themes, multiple partners, etc. And the pornography is a safe way for them to explore that without actually wanting to do it in real life. And so I know that what's coming up probably for some of you are the ethical concerns around this. Taboo, power dynamics, scary, right? And so I'm going to point you towards a couple of other videos and episodes that I've done on fantasy versus desire versus choice, and the difference between all of that. And then also the porn panic and the porn myths video here. Let's talk about fantasy versus desire versus choice again right now. So fantasies are things we have. Okay. So if we have this inherent sexuality, it just exists. Fantasy are things that you think about that would turn you on, that are exciting to you. Desire is something that you would want to do in real life, and choice is what you would actually choose to do in real life. And so there's a difference in your fantasies. Just because you have certain things that are exciting to you, that doesn't mean that you would choose to do them in real life. For example, I'm thinking of like a porn video on the pizza delivery guy dropping off a pizza and then you having sex with the pizza delivery guy, or vice versa, whatever that is. That might be a fantasy, something that you watch and is exciting to you, but like you don't have any real desire in real life to actually have sex with the pizza delivery person. Maybe another example is like a threesome. So the idea of a threesome is exciting to you, and but you're like, oh, I would never want to do that in real life. Or maybe, let's go fantasy desire versus choice. Maybe you are like, like that might be exciting in real life, but I will not choose that, or I'm choosing not to choose that because of X, Y, and Z and these reasons. So there's a difference here. And the goal here, and especially with sexuality, so many of us have been so taught to be so afraid of it because we can't control it. And it's something that is out of our control, and it's very scary and it's very dangerous. And, it is for victims. It is for victims. But what we want to start to regain is like, can we really trust ourselves? And in this realm of sexuality, is it really out of our control? Or how can we start to think about this differently? How can we heal these parts inside of us that have been so wounded so that we can trust ourselves, and so that the choice is the most important piece and we're not threatened by fantasies or desires, and we know what we're going to choose? And then another podcast episode I'm going to point you towards is the porn panic and the myths. I think it's called More Myths About Porn. But we dive into like rape culture. We dive into the scary, icky stuff that your mind might be going to around this, like rape culture and underage stuff. And, of course, there's no justification for any of that. But we talk about that in depth in that video. And then what I would to here add is that you also get to choose which fantasies that you feed to. And so instead of being so afraid and pushing everything away, can we look at and make conscious decisions on how we want to use our sexuality? How can we use it for good? That's a term I learned from Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, who I love. And I haven't listened to her in a few years, but a couple of years I listened to a lot of her stuff, and I would recommend her. She's a really great sex therapist. Using sexuality for good. How can we choose to use sexuality for good? So let's get back to, what are there other ways that people use pornography in healthy ways, ethical ways, that in a monogamous relationship? So some people use it to reconnect with their bodies. Someone might say, I feel disconnected from my body or my sex drive, and this helps me to wake that part up again. I had a friend who told me once, she said, Sarah, smut books have saved my marriage. And so for those of you who don't know what smut is like a slang term referring to books that usually have explicit content or erotic content, or, it's like, what's the fairy smut? You're going to laugh when you look it up, but like books about fantasy books, but then there's sex scenes in it, but there's a whole story around it. And for so many women, it helps them reignite this part of them that feels quenched, or that they're not sure how to awaken. Using porn or using sexual material as a way to reignite arousal can support intimacy, not undermine it. And so again, I love this idea of looking at what's the means to the ends here, and do we like the result that we're trying to create with this decision? So for a lot of women too, especially, sex coaches will often really encourage masturbation so that they can learn their bodies, so they can learn how to feel arousal. If they can learn how to feel turned on, then they can teach their partner that. So can you use it to reconnect with your bodies? Another way that some people use it is if one partner has a lower libido. So maybe we've come to this agreement that sometimes I'll meet my certain needs on my own. In some relationships, one partner has lower desire, or maybe is going through something, maybe they're on some medication, they have illness, they have trauma, maybe it's postpartum, like right after a baby. And so watching porn in these cases can be an agreed upon form of care that honors the relationship rather than placing pressures on the other partner. Some people use it together and it becomes playful or bonding. So what's the means to the end? Is it to help us reconnect with each other? Is it to help us escape from each other? What are we okay with? Here's where I want to talk a little bit about porn versus real sex. And so sometimes in purity culture dynamics, because all sex is under the same thing, or like all sex is bad, or sexual feelings are all bad, or, we don't talk about it. It's all under the same thing. So porn is the same as sex in our minds, but there's a very, very, very big difference here. Porn is curated for entertainment, whereas real sex is rooted in connection, trust, and intimacy. Porn is entertainment. Real sex is like a connective moment, an intimate moment, connection, trust. Porn is unrealistic bodies and unrealistic scenarios, right? The pizza delivery person scenario. Whereas real sex is imperfect and real bodies and real life dynamics. Porn is really focused on visual stimulation, whereas real sex is typically, hopefully, about emotional closeness and presence. And that's where we can create a lot of beauty with real sex. Porn, again, is purely entertainment, and real sex, there's a lot more opportunity for depth and other things in real sex, not just entertainment. Again, what's under the surface of the porn use? And so if you're someone and you are finding that you're having a hard time enjoying real sex with your partner, and you're using porn as a way to cope with that, instead of shaming that, what is wrong with you? You shouldn't be using porn. You should connect with your partner. What is it? What's difficult about the connection with your partner? Is there anything that we can work on here? What are the conversations we need to have together? Where do I need to, can I focus on real life, mindful, present moments? Or is my brain just so kind of hyper distracted that it's difficult for me to focus in on the present moment? Okay, so this last question, what if my partner doesn't agree with me? Now, we've hit a ton of topics today. It's not completely comprehensive. We're covering a lot of area and ground today, but let's go into this last part. What if my partner doesn't agree with me? You are allowed to have needs and desires and wants, and so are they. And so you're not wrong. If you are someone who you're learning about this, you're thinking about it this way, you want to use porn as a solo sexual expression, you're not wrong for wanting solo sexual expression, but they're also not wrong for having feelings or boundaries about it. And so you're both allowed to bring your full truth to the table. And the goal here is co-creating a relationship that feels safe for both of you. And here's what the goal isn't. The goal isn't to take some of the things, hide some of the things that you want to put on the table and put them underneath the table just to appease your partner. The goal is to put it all out there, all of it out there, and to co-create a relationship that you feel like can be safe for both of you. It's really important that you don't abandon yourself. And it's also important that you allow them to have their own thoughts and their boundaries and their feelings around it. And so making a commitment that you can't keep, I'll never watch porn again. Don't worry, honey, I'll never watch porn again. That will create a lot more relationship issues than being honest about where you're currently at and what you're currently thinking about and what you're currently working through. So be willing to have hard conversations. These are some great questions for you and your partner to discuss together. First, where did I learn rules about porn, sex, fidelity? What's my base operating understanding around porn, sex, fidelity? Where did I learn all of this in the first place? Do you feel like we've inherited any rules that don't actually serve us? What are the unspoken rules that we have? Are they all serving us? What do you fear when we talk about porn? What is scary to you about porn? What are the concerns, questions, fears that you have around it? What parts of our sexuality feel shared and what parts feel personal? What boundaries feel supportive and not controlling for each of us? And, if this is something going on in your relationship, what would help rebuild trust if you've been hurt or betrayed? What can I do to rebuild trust if you've been hurt or betrayed? It's okay if things are uncomfortable while you both sit and work through this. So this is a call to, can you expand your capacity for some discomfort here and be willing to have those hard conversations versus, and Jessica, a coach in the program, talks about this a lot. I think she's going to do an episode on this soon. I need to reach out to her. But instead of just people pleasing or being the peacemaker here, how can we fully bring it and bring our full selves to the table and sit with it? Our partner's discomfort is not ours to solve. So there is a difference between being sensitive to someone's emotions and experiences and being responsible for them. It's not your responsibility to regulate your partner's emotions or to even make them happy. It is your responsibility to be your most authentic, your most loving, and your truest self, which isn't just peacemaker, martyr vibes. True intimacy isn't just keeping the peace. True intimacy is being real, loving, and honest, even when it's uncomfortable. Another question to, lovingly ask your partner is this about pornography, or what else might be underneath the surface? Is it feeling unwanted? Is it feeling unchosen? Is it fear of not being enough? Have you been cheated on before? Is it fear of pornography and some of that like sexual shame or like the myths piece of pornography? So again, I would really encourage you to go listen to those videos, the myths about porn. Are there some myths there that are really scary, which would make sense if, you're operating from those, if that's what you believe about porn. Or maybe I'm ashamed of what your porn use means about me. That's a juicy one too. I'm ashamed of what your porn use means about me. And then lastly, sometimes you're not aligned, and that's really hard. There are moments in relationships where values or needs don't match anymore. And so you might need to reevaluate what kind of relationship you're building and whether or not your values aligned as you're having these deeper, harder conversations. All right, you guys, woof, we covered a lot. We covered a lot in today's episode. Have a great week. If any of you have questions, I was thinking about this. I would love to take more questions as podcast episodes. So send in your questions to the support@sarahbrewer.com, and we can do more of like a Q&A style. If anything about this episode brought up questions, or I didn't cover something, or you want to talk about something more in depth, send over a question to support@sarahbrewer.com. Would love to do that and have those conversations with you all. All right, have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.
I want to invite you to come and listen to my free class, How to Overcome Pornography for Good Without Using Willpower. We talk about how to stop giving into urges without pure willpower or relying on phone filters so that you can actually stop wanting pornography. We talk about how to stop giving up after a few weeks or months, and spoiler alert, the answer isn't have more willpower. And then lastly, we talk about how to make a life without porn easily sustainable and permanent. If you're trying to quit porn, this class is a game changer. So you can go and sign up at sarahbrewer.com/masterclass, and it is totally free.